What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Leading Leaders. I have one of my good friends on here, Travis Reynolds. This man is a man of many talents. He does so many ministries. And just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Man, I appreciate you having me. Yeah, I do a little bit of everything. In our church capacity, I'm the young adults pastor for Emmanuel Fellowship Church here in Seminole, Oklahoma. I'm the state director of Cross Trail Outfitters of Oklahoma, which is a youth hunting and fishing ministry geared toward guiding the next generation to Christ through the outdoors. So my job consists of taking young men between 7 and 20 and helping them build their faith, building men out of them, teaching them outdoor skills, hunting and fishing stuff, all the time. Summer camps, we do weekend outings and things of that nature. It's a blast. I'm a hobbyist auctioneer and taxidermist and just kind of do a little bit of everything. So,
well, I will say that I was super happy that you agreed to come on here because out of everybody that I've had on here, you have the most active ministries going on at the same time, and I think it's amazing, because it's awesome doing ministry, but man, when God gives you the talent to do multiple ministries all at the same time, it just puts you up on a next level. And I'm not saying that, everybody's not filling a bunch of positions, but you literally have some active ministries that are all going on at the same time together.
Yeah.
And
it takes a lot of grace.
It's very impressive to me.
Thank you.
I find it amazing. So I got my first question for you would be, how did you know when to start each of your ministry? Like, when did God let you know, hey, this is what I want you to do?
Man, that's a good question. Because they each have such a unique starting point and a unique testimony behind them. So going into when I gave my life back to Christ, I was actually an adult when I gave my life back to the Lord, and come out of I was in law enforcement at the time and was coming out of a really dark season, and plugged into church and needed help, needed people in my life, and we found that, and it was great. Encountered Christ, gave my life back, and it was almost immediate. I mean, within weeks, I was feeling God, pull us in the direction of youth ministry. And I always, when I was a teenager, I spent some time in youth groups, mainly because it was a social thing. And but I do feel like I experienced Christ there, and so that always had a place in my heart. So I went in to talk with the guy that at the time he was the youth pastor there, and spoke with him. And I said, hey, I have an interest in this, and he said, well, just show up, and so we did, and then they couldn't get rid of us, and so we were kind of became associate youth pastors for 7 years, 6 or 7 years over there, and did that role for a long time. And God moved in a great way, did a lot in our life, taught us a lot. In that time frame, I had left the law enforcement career, and I'd stepped into. We owned our own business, and I worked with horses, and was a farrier, putting shoes on horses, taking care of horse feet and things like that. And we had a pretty successful business, and I actually got into an accident with a horse, and I broke 2 vertebrae in my back and separated some ribs and was in really bad shape. And I remember I was fishing as I was recovering. I was fishing with a buddy of mine. He was asking, well, how's everything going with work? And I said, man, it's awful. I said, my back hurts all the time. It's very physically demanding to do that job. And said, I'm praying that God brings me something else. And he said, well, what would you do for a living if you could? And I said, man, I just want to hunt and fish and preach to kids for a living. He goes, oh my gosh, you got to talk to my buddy. And he connected me with Cross Trail Outfitters. And there's a guy in Texas that ended up coming up, speaking with us. We had a great time communicating that. Almost immediately, God was pulling me toward, this is what we need to do. And took a leap of faith. We left our business and kind of sold it. We gave it to other farriers and things of that nature. And we raise all of our own support for, financial needs and things, and for the whole ministry. And this community has supported us and fully funded us the past 3 years. And so God's been just so faithful in that. And then with the young adult ministry, we began to step away from youth ministry about a year ago and started to make that transition and praying, man, there's a need. Our church is right beside the college here in Seminole. And man, it was just always on mine and my wife's heart that there's a need there. There's a big need for that age group. And I'll be honest, I think that we haven't done the greatest of jobs as a church, the body in general, of accommodating when kids leave the youth group. How does that look, and how do you plug them into church? And now some do. I'm not saying there aren't programs, but what I'm saying is I think that there needs to be a catalyst, if you will, to cross from youth group into main service. That's intimidating for some of that age group, and especially today. And so that's what we started, Catalyst Young Adult Ministries, and man, it's been awesome. That's been going for a few months now, and it's been a blessing. So
that's amazing, dude. I love how you said that when you came back to Christ, it was just like boom, 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 and it kind of reminds me of where mine was, and you know, I wasn't in a place with Christ that I should have been. You know, I was dealing with, like you said, dude, I was in a dark spot, and you know, Sherlock Valley, he's an amazing evangelist, came to our church when we were going into Tecumseh. And it was like the whole time he was preaching, it was like God's calling me out. The whole time I'm sitting there just like start bawling. And that was one of the things I really made real big about myself is, I don't cry. And dude, I was bawling like a baby the whole time this dude was preaching. And you know, me and my wife stepped into children's church pastors after that at that church, and then got called over to, kind of got church hurt, left, did a little church hopping and stuff, and finally found Starting Point at the time was Temple of Praise, and that was one of the stipulations I made, you know, with God and my wife was I don't want no responsibility.
How'd that work out?
yeah. And man, I kid you not, it was like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We were going to church for like 3 weeks, and Pastor Jeff was like, "Hey, I need you to see you and your wife in my office right now." And I was like, "Heck, okay." And then that's when he's like, "Man, I really feel like God's called y'all here to be youth leaders, man." And me and my wife, I couldn't see not doing it now. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Me and her, but now the assistant youth pastors out here, and dude, I couldn't see not being out here with his youth.
It's amazing to me. Like I see people come into relationship with Christ, and you know, in our case, I feel like the case that we have, for the most part, is not everybody has our track, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody steps into a relationship, and it's like, boom, here you go. You know, you're willing to say yes, and we're going a million miles an hour, and that's okay. But my deal is, I think when you have a yes for God, when you're willing to chase God and just say yes and be obedient to it, man, you're gonna see a lot of stuff. And going back to, you know, I think there's always, you know, when you're dealing with people, there's those hurts and things. But man, looking at it now, like there were moments where I wanted to leave. Yeah. I mean, even in my ministries and stuff, there were moments where it was like we were hurt, we were frustrated, we were honestly, I mean, and I know, like, as a pastor, we're not supposed to talk about, oh, we're afraid of this. But man, there have been moments I've been scared to death. Like, God, I know you've been faithful, but are you going to be faithful? And those are scary moments, man. And so saying yes to God, I think, is over the last few years, one of the greatest things that I've learned in my life is if you just say yes and trust what God is doing in your life, amazing things happen.
Absolutely. That's very, that was very well put, man. That's awesome. So, you know, I mentioned that you are man of many talents. This question directly points to that. How do you balance all your different ministries?
Man, I've failed a lot. And I used to be really afraid of that. Failure scared me. I grew up feeling like failure was the worst thing, right? And so, and maybe that's another podcast, like my whole testimony and stuff. But I will say, like, I think as a child, my biggest fear was I couldn't fail. Like, if I failed, I'm harder on myself than probably anybody else. So balancing these ministries really got a lot easier when I became okay with failure, that when I became okay with, okay, that didn't work. How do we fix it? The most important thing that I learned in this and trying to balance everything was that if I'm not being present in my family, if I'm not being a good husband because of my schedule, if I'm not being a good dad because of my schedule, then I'm probably not going to be a good pastor in any capacity.
Yeah.
And so the past couple of years, especially, it's become a very focused effort on my priorities, right? So God, family, and then my ministries, whatever God puts in our ministry. And I think God rewards that because I don't think God would have it any other way. I think that's the way that we're supposed to do this thing. And so with all the things that we have going on, there was a lot of times where it was, what's the fire that I have to put out right now? Yeah. And I lived a lot of my life in putting out fires and, okay, well, I got to deal with this. Well, now I've dealt with this so long, this has snuck up and I got to deal with this. And man, planning and scheduling and having a good team. Like, I can't overemphasize what my team has done for me. In Cross Trail Outfitters, at the church, with our ministries that we do there, whatever we're doing, we build a team of people that have that yes in their heart, that are willing to be a part and do stuff. And when you can trust the people you're doing ministry with, and it's not about you, right? So when ministry is never about us. So because it's not about me, I can say, hey, I want you to minister this week at Catalyst. Hey, I want you to lead this outing with these boys and share, God with them and take them hunting. Like, I don't need to be on everything. I want to be, but I say this a lot, and so people that know me and watch this will probably tune out for a second, but don't. It's important. But the best advice I ever got about balancing ministry came from Tim Tate, and he said, there are good things and there are God things. And he said, man, we all want to do good things, but sometimes we spend so much of our time chasing good things that we don't have time for the God things. And so reevaluating my calling and my anointing and where God has put me has helped me balance those things, and saying, okay, man, these people want me to go down here and minister or come down and lead worship for them, and that's great. I really want to do that, but I can't miss out on what God called me to. And so being able to say no is a huge thing in balance, and being able to understand and saying no lovingly. There are times where I think we say no and God is telling us, like, you should have said no to that. But saying no and being able to tell people, like, listen, this is my schedule. I'd love to help you at a time that fits, but this is my schedule. And if we can fit that in, cool. If we can't, then I'm really sorry. So that's one of those concepts for me is saying no to some of the good things to fit in more of the God things, and then balancing with family.
And that's very good. And I'm 100% firmly believe with you, because I feel like a lot of people get into ministry and just get so busy. Oh, well, we got to always do this, that you end up leaving your family behind. And one of the greatest things that I've found in me and my wife's relationship is that, and I've had some friends make fun of us for this. They're like, well, you have to check in with your... No. I don't have to check in with my wife. I want her to know, and I want her to be involved. I said, it's different, man. I'm not checking in with her. Me and her are connected, and we're going to both know everything about
I love
each other.
I think, listen, I'll be honest, like, as far as the generation thing, I think that we all poke fun at each other, but that's one thing that, man, I agree with you. If we're not, it's not about, like, I have to ask permission or I have to check. Man, for me, it's a respect thing. And I'm not, my wife may be watching this laughing her head off, because I'm not the greatest at this. Like, I still struggle with that. And honestly, I would say that if I had to list, like, my faults or whatever, that's probably one of the things that's toward the top of the list. Is my prayer in my heart is I want to be better at balancing it. I think it's, we can look at all different kinds of things. How can I, speak better? How can I do better with finance or whatever? Like, a lot of times we know the answer, but putting that in practice is tough, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's something that this year I want to focus on being better, is that balance. I'm a lot better than I was, but I still have a lot of room to improve on that.
I think everybody always has room to improve on that, man. I think that's something that you will always constantly grow in, for sure.
Yeah.
So my next question for you, is it difficult to discern when you're hearing a message from God which group that it's for?
Not, no, man, that's a good question because I've never really thought about it. So I guess no, because when I sit down and I know I have something kind of for a catalyst, I think it comes back to the relationship we have with the people involved. So I have a relationship with our young adult group. I have a relationship with our CTO boys. And because I do this every day, like I have this benefit of being able to, I know what these kids are facing. And if I'm looking at an outing for a weekend and I've got, age range from 10 to 16, I mean, they're going to face a lot different things.
Mhm.
So they're going to face things that are way different. And for me, it's super not challenging, but it's something that stretches me because it's like, I might preach on Jonah. Like I might minister to both of these groups in the same week on Jonah. But that's what's beautiful about the word, man, is like you and I can sit here and quietly read the same scripture and we're going to get something different out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that God built it that way, that he created it that way. So when I'm asking God, man, these kids really need you, what would you have them hear? For me, I think being able to sit down and write out, a devotion, or so with CTO, we do a question of the day. And we get up, and it's normally a weekend deal. So we'll get up Saturday morning, we're going to ask them a question. And sometimes, like, my favorite one is, who are you and why are you here? And not just, oh, my name's Travis Reynolds, I'm here to shoot a deer. No, who are you and what's your purpose? Who does God say you are? And digging into identity. And so those come a lot more natural because we can sit around the campfire and have conversation with these kids. And with Catalyst, it's kind of the same. So Catalyst, we do worship, we give a short word, whether it's me or another speaker, and then we sit down with these people and we talk.
Yeah.
And I love church. I love church so much, man. I love going and worshiping. I love the people there. I love hearing the message. But I found that with these generations coming up behind us, they like to be heard. They have questions, right? And so is it tough for me to discern which group? No, not really, because for me, I think we just, A, I pray into it, obviously. B, when we start having the conversations, I can kind of pick out the issues that age ranges, are dealing with, and we can have those discussions. And C, it's kind of what's on your heart. And let's let God work through that, as opposed to just, I give a message and trust that you're going to get something out of it, but you still go home and have questions.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's difficult for me to discern that. But now that you said that, I'm probably going to go home and be like, wait a minute, God. So
let's see it. Yeah.
But no, I mean, it hasn't been so far. It's been encouraging to get to minister to all these. And I will say, and this isn't part of your question, but I'll say what blows me away when I am writing devotions and messages and stuff is what these age groups deal with is so real, man. And I will say, because I'm guilty of it, I think we almost write it off sometimes when it's younger kids and it's like, oh, what could you possibly be worried about? Man, they're dealing with stuff and it's tough. And so I think when I went, I'm going to be real transparent on this. When I went into CTO, I had done youth ministry for a long time already, and it was kind of like, well, the hunting part of it is going to be the challenge, right? Because all these kids need to shoot a hog, or they need to harvest a deer, or we need to do this, or we need to all catch fish. And I was like, the ministry side's easy. Like, how hard could it be? We'll talk about what they're facing and move on. And it didn't take long before I realized, like, man, I had that way backwards. Like, writing a message for these kids, I take it so seriously now because they face some serious stuff in this world.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I've noticed, because even helping with FCA and stuff like that, man, it's stinking eye-opening, man.
Yeah.
Like, and I literally had a adult ask me, man, I didn't know that kids that young could be dealing with depression. And I said, bro, I dealt with depression when I was like 12 years old. What are you talking about?
But what were we told, though?
But
for me, growing up, it was like, you're not depressed. You have nothing to be depressed about. You're not paying bills.
and I'm not dogging you, mom and
No,
dad.
no. Sorry.
No, but that's the way we were
Yeah.
raised, and me and my dad's talked a lot about it. About everybody's been raised in that John Wayne mindset, right?
Yeah,
Especially
dude.
men, dude. Suck it up.
Yeah.
You know, you got other stuff to do. You don't deal with your emotions right now.
Yeah.
Shove it down.
That's something I'd love to dig into. I will say, I think Siri just came up on your phone, so I don't know if it stops your recording, but just in case, because I heard her talk and say something, so I don't know if it was yours or mine, but I didn't want it to stop recording. Just in case it shut it down. Is it still rolling?
Yeah, we're still good.
Cool. All right. Leave it in. But the John Wayne, I've never heard it referred to as the John Wayne mindset, but I will say, and I know, like I said, maybe my testimony maybe another time, but man, growing up, that was so drilled into me by the men that raised me, was like, you never showed emotion. You didn't talk about stuff. You weren't allowed. And if you did, I vividly remember, and my mom is going to laugh when she listens to this, but I broke my collarbone one time at a friend's house. We were playing Duck, Duck, Goose, but we were like tackling each other. I mean, it was like, we were boys, you know.
Yeah.
And I told everybody it was a 4-wheeler accident. So all of my high school friends that were watching this, I totally lied to you. It was Duck, Duck, Goose. But we're running around, and this guy falls in front of me, and I go to dive, and I land on this collarbone, and my shoulder was wrapped around in front of me. My little brother was there, and I remember I said, "Go home and get mom." And my mom and my stepdad raised me, and I said, "But don't tell Randy, because he'll make fun of me." And he would, because to him, every injury was like, in his mind, I don't think he had ill intentions. It was just one of those deals that was like, you just don't get hurt. And if you do, don't ever show that you're hurt. And man, I was a kid and scared to death, and that happened. And then he showed up and he's like, "It's just dislocated." And he tried to pop it back. It was nasty. But it's one of those things that's the mentality, and not just physical stuff, emotional stuff was so off limits. And that's what, when we sit around the campfire with these boys, my heart is, I want them to understand that, you know, we look at the story of Lazarus. Jesus wept. Jesus, he could experience emotion. He didn't let his emotion control anything. He didn't let his emotion control what he did, but he was okay with experiencing it because he was human. And Jesus was the manliest dude I know. You know, he would walk into any place and tell them that they were loved. He had no problem showing love and showing, you know, in that case, he showed emotion. You know, he had all these things that went on. If he can do that and he was manly, why do I think that I have to hide all that? You know, exactly. It's been a rewiring of my childhood a little bit. And Mom, that's no knock on you, love you. But it was kind of this eye-opening thing, because I was like you, I didn't cry.
Yeah.
And then I remember I sat in church for 3 weeks, kind of unwillingly. And on the 4th week, I can't tell you the message that was preached. I have no idea what he said, but I was a lot like you. Like, my feet started moving, and then I realized, like, he'd given an altar call, and I'm standing there and nobody else stood up. And I said a cuss word, like, in the church, because I was like, that was who I was at the time. And everybody looks and was like, well, they know I need Jesus now. So I walked to the front and I started bawling. And I remember there was a couple minutes where I started crying, and I was like, I had that mentality, like, stop it. You know, this is stupid. Quit crying. And it just kept coming. And finally I was like, it's not so bad. God's moving. Great things are happening.
And I've found that, you know, because I loved being in the military. I loved being in the Marine Corps. But, bro, when I say that it drilled that in your mindset, and, you know, then worked in Department of Corrections, didn't help none either, you know. And it was crazy, because even when I was at one of my lowest points, me and my wife had 2 miscarriages back to back. I wouldn't let nothing out. You couldn't get a drop out of me.
Yeah.
Man. And it was funny, because God sends you people in such crazy ways that it cracks me up. And the dude that he sent me, you know, Aaron Brown, if you're watching this, I'm talking about you. He sent me this dude, and, you know, you see this guy, he's big, burly guy, big old, like, grizzly bear walking in the room. And, you know, me and him are holding each other crying, you know, in the room.
Yeah, man, it's I love that though. Like
Yeah.
now with my relationship with Christ, it's like I'll be leading worship sometimes on stage, and a lyric just, man, God just hits me with it, and it's like, man, it gets to me, and it is, and look, we can get into this theological debate about emotional stuff, and listen, but worship, I think there should be an emotion there. It should be this moment where, God, I want to worship you with everything I got, and in that, man, there are a lot of times where I'm gonna cry, you know, and God will speak into my life in those moments, and I'm so much more comfortable now crying than I ever have been. And I want my boys. I got 3 boys and a little girl, and I want them to grow up seeing that, you know, I like to think I'm pretty manly. You know, I go hunt in the mountains with my bow and shoot bear and deer and all this crazy stuff and get to go do all this wild stuff. And I like to think of myself as being manly. And I hope that they see that. But more than anything, I want them to see that I'm godly.
Yeah.
And that being manly and being godly can exist together.
Oh, absolutely.
And your emotions will, you know, they're there.
Yeah.
Don't let them control you.
But yeah. Right. And that's one of the things is, man, like, God made us with emotions.
Yeah.
He didn't make us soulless robots. You know what I mean?
Sometimes I think it would have been easier if he did. You know,
Yeah.
like, no emotion.
But yeah, man, I completely agree with you.
Man, I'll tell you a quick story. You were talking about the Marine Corps and my law enforcement career, talking about when I really realized that was such a problem in today's society. I worked a domestic, and me and this guy, he was clearly not doing great things, but he had a little kid there, a 3-year-old son, and I left because we had no legal grounds for any action. So I leave, and 30 minutes later, I get a call of they were hit by a car. He put the kid in the car seat and was walking down the road, and they got hit, and I did CPR and lost the baby in my arms. And I remember he was the same age as my middle son at the time, and I remember going back to my car and sitting in my car and losing it, because you can't lose it in front of people, right? Then they think you're unstable. Mm-hmm. I go back to my car and I lose it, man, and I'm bawling and just not okay. And my sergeant, she comes and knocks on my window, and I roll my window down and I'm drying it up, you know. And I remember I've never been made fun of like that in my life after that kind of moment. And I remember sitting there while she's making fun of me and getting on to me for being emotional about it. And I was like, and at the time I wasn't a Christian, you know, and at the time I'm like, we have a real problem. You know, we got a real problem with, there are some good men that take their life or completely distance themselves or whatever, but just it develops into this horrible thing where the enemy can get a foothold if we don't break that stigma of what it looks like to be a man.
Yep.
So that's something we're really big on with CTO is breaking that stigma of not just emotion, but how you love your wife, you know, how you share, how you open up, how you worship, all of these things that we've been so guarded about and have to look a certain way because we're men. And if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. And man, we're going to break that. And I believe God's doing big stuff in that in these generations coming behind us.
I love it, man, because that's one of the things that I've pressed on a lot.
Yeah.
And even with my dad, you know, going to church, all these different church camps, man, and watching and I'm not saying all the guys are this way, but watching, like, especially in the kids camp, because our youth camp was amazing. But in the kids camp, you know, I find it that men make it a point to, you know, try to be the cool guy, you know, and that's not why we're here. You know, that's not why you're here. You're here to show these kids what it truly looks like to fall in love with God and be in love with God.
That's good, man.
And I even talked to my dad. I was like, man, if we need to have a class about this, we can. That's fine. I will gladly
dude,
talk about it. And he was like looking at me, he's like, yeah, dude, I agree, because, and you know, this stems off of a lot about what leading leaders is because I feel like we have that such a just throw you in a position and good luck.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, we do.
And that's church as a whole. And that's why I was listening to Pastor Jeff and he was talking about how we have that missed gap, you know, and God was like, yeah, leading leaders. You need to start leading leaders. And I was like,
put that on a podcast.
Okay. Yeah. And I was like, okay.
That's
And,
cool,
you know,
man.
that's where all of it came from.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that, because it is a problem.
Yeah.
And if people don't start noticing it's a problem, it's just going to keep going.
When it opens the door for so many other things, it opens the door for pride. It opens the door for all these things. Because I've watched so many people that, because of that mindset of what a man is, like you said, being thrown into leadership or any kind of role and being like, good luck. Well, then there's that fear built into us that I can't ask for help. I'm supposed to have it figured out. You know, I realized over the last few years, like, there was a time in my life where I knew everything. I think it was around like 16 to 18. Like, I knew it all, you know, and looking back on it, it's like, man, the older I get, the more I realize I don't know that much. I don't, you know, and figuring this thing out. And so I have to be super careful, because I don't want to feel, you know, inadequate or inept. And so there are these moments where almost like stuff gets asked and I may not have any understanding, but there was a time in my life where I didn't understand. They'd be like, yo, can you do that? Well, yeah, sure. You know, I have no idea. You know, and it's just one of those things that if we aren't careful and open up and be true to ourselves about who God is in our life, who we are, and be raw and real, then if we can't do that, then what I find is those people generally struggle with pride. Those people struggle with, I mean, all these different things of not being able to allow people in, because that fear of, well, they might see the truth. So I got to hide that with this front. And, you know, those people, you know, I've watched them make fun of folks or be mean to people, belittle people just to make themselves feel. And it's like, man, if we could get past that, like, what time are we wasting?
Yeah.
You know, I think this is what I heard the other day, that I just don't feel like I have time to waste anymore on stuff. You know, like, we have so much to do in the kingdom. We have so many people to reach and things to go do and miracles to see and all these great things to happen. But if I have to stop and take time to battle my pride or battle all these other things, what am I missing? And so for me, it's like, God, what do I got to do to stay out of that? Like, don't even let me go down there. You know?
For sure, man. And I completely, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've seen that too, or heard that guy talking about that.
I think Bill Johnson said it one time, that I don't have time to waste on things that are not godly, or however he said it. But I was sitting in church Sunday and I felt God say, like, you know, we don't have time to waste. We just don't have time. And so, not trying to steal Bill Johnson's quote, but it's true, man. And it's true for all of us. If you're a Christian, we don't have time to waste.
And it's funny that you said that, the way you said that, and then the time that I'm currently in right now. And that's one of the things I talked to my mom about. I was like, man, I'm not trying to rush you, but I really feel like we have to press in right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to force you to hurry up and speed up, but I really feel like the gas pedal needs to be pressed real hard.
Yes, man. It's like, I don't want you to hurry, but you're going to have to hurry.
Yeah.
I feel you.
How did you seek God personally for you, deciding in the factor of finding the pathway in your life?
Whoa, that's deep. That's a man. Well, I kind of got into how I found Christ and what happened there, and seeking God specifically for the pathway of my life. I don't know that that's necessarily what I did. I think I sought God and He revealed to me, you know, my passions and the things I wanted. I never sat down and I can't remember a time where I sat down and said, God, you know, what should my life look like? I sat down and I sought God and sought His presence and just chased after Him in prayer and fasting and just truly seeking who He was. And in that, I mean, things started to open up, you know, and I think that's the thing about my walk that I like the most, is that we fight for everything, right? Like we're in ministry. I feel like it's constantly a battle of making things happen. We talked earlier off camera about our schedules and things. And it's like, it always feels like there's not a struggle, but a battle of trying to keep everything lined out in balance. It goes back to the other question. But for me, what I love is that I would seek the face of God, and I would start feeling a call of ministry of some sort, youth ministry or whatever. I mean, honestly, like I wish I had this really profound, deep biblical answer, but it was just passions that I had that gave me and kind of established the root, and God began to work in those. And praise God, He opened up doors for me that never could have been opened.
Yeah.
And just an example, talking about the pathway of my life, we talked about a lot of the stuff that I do is, you know, between all the different things, and they're not all ministry. Like I mentioned, taxidermy, and I auctioneer for a lot of little local deals here, try to help out different organizations. But the auctioneering thing, you know, that's become a major thing that I get to do, and I'm blessed to get to do, for whether it's the schools or you know, charity events, or you know, whatever it may be. For the Boomtown Playground deal, I love getting involved with mission, you know, people that have a mission and going and helping them. But the reason I became an auctioneer was because I had the day off one day on a Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was, and went to Holdenville to the livestock auction. Because when I was little, I remember going to the sale barn. They had the best hamburgers. And I was like, well, may as well see if it's true here in Holdenville, you know. And I went in and got a burger and sat and watched the sale. And a 12-year-old kid got up and started auctioneering. And I was like, if he can do it, I got to be able to do it, you know. And got in my truck, pulled up YouTube, and started watching auctioneers and learning about auctioneering. And I came home and told my wife, I said, hey, I research auctioneer school. She's like, what? Like, what are you doing? You know, like that's left field. And I said, yeah. I said, I think I might go. So we started researching it. And the problem was, it was in Missouri. And I had to spend, I think it was a week or 10 days in Missouri. You're responsible for hotels. You're responsible for all this. And then it was like $1,500 for this school, whatever it was. It was for us at the time, it was not doable. It was not going to happen. And I was like, all right, well, you know, God, if God wanted me to do that, he would make a way. But of course, I signed up for the newsletter from this school, and the next day, I'm not kidding you, like I wish I had the timeline like documented somehow in pictures. The next day, I get an email from that auctioneering school, and they said, hey, we noticed you signed up for the newsletter, and you were interested in the school. We're starting our first ever pilot program of online auctioneer school, and we're going to give it to the first 20 people for $150, and you'll be a full-fledged certified auctioneer.
Nice.
And I was like, sold, like sign me up. And I did the first ever Missouri Auction School online course, man. And we would call in on conference calls and chant and do our thing. And I passed. They gave me a certification deal, you know, saying I did it. And then didn't use it for like 3 years. And that's one of those things, talking about God establishing your path. Like, I wish I had this deep, like, well, I read, you know, and Job, like, no, dude, it was, man, that would be really cool. God, if there's something in that, you know, you'd make a way. And God, you better be careful what you ask, because God's going to show up in it. And now, like our banquet every year, that's our main source of revenue. That's how we fund this ministry, a big chunk of it. And that comes from the auction that we do. Yeah. And so it's cool that God brought it full circle, you know.
And that's awesome, man. And I love how you say that, because I was hesitant to put this question down, because I'm kind of the same way as you are, because I can see that God has a plan for something in the future. Like, oh yeah, God, I know you want us to get here, but his pathway is like puzzle pieces falling down in front of me. Yep. That's what I feel like. And it's never been just like golden brick road,
dude,
going there. Word. It's like he's like, all right, you want this? Yeah, God, I want it. All right, well, there's your first step. Good luck. And, you know, and it's amazing. I love it, because it really challenges you sometimes, man. And you're sitting there like, are you sure that one right there? And
it doesn't seem like that fits.
Yeah. But I definitely agree, and I can adhere with what you're saying, man. I
think people need to hear even that. Like I said, I mean, would it feel more like pastoral to have this like deep philosophical answer? Sure, but man, the truth is the truth, and I think it gives hope to other people watching this, that they're like, well, this is all I do for work. Like, you know, God's not doing that through me. God's not starting ministries, or God's not, you know, putting me in this place. Yeah, He is. He is, and it might not look like what you think. I always, you know, talk about, there was a time at camp where I went to one youth camp my whole life. There was a girl that I was dating that was in youth camp. So of course she was at youth. And so I ended up going to youth camp that year. But man, God moved, and it was big. And this guy was talking to me and prayed over me. And I believe I encountered Christ. And it was funny because he asked me like 12 or 13, I think. And he was like, what do you want to do when you grow up, man? And I said, man, I want to be a pastor. And it was like, now looking at it, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But there was a conversation that was had, and I don't remember if it was then or the next day or what, but I remember him saying, man, if that's your heart, a white dove's not going to come kick the doors open, grab you by the tongue, and preach a message. Like, you're going to have to go get it. And then David Swift, another mentor of mine, that was a conversation we had. The first conversation I had with him, he said, well, what's your heart? What do you want? I said, well, man, I want to be full-time ministry. He said, well, why aren't you? And that's kind of been his challenge to me all this time. And great mentor in my life. And he'll say things. I'm like, he said, don't talk about it. Just tell me what you want and let's do it,
Yeah.
And it's always been challenging, but it doesn't look like what we think it should a lot of times.
Definitely not, man. And I definitely agree with you, because I mean, I've even asked God. I was put in a position of leadership at one of my jobs I worked at, and I was like, man, God, if you want me here, make it easy. If you don't want me here, you're going to let me know. He let me know, because I ended up getting suspended that day from work.
Wow.
And kicked out of that position. So, I was so mad when it first happened that I got suspended. And then literally it was on a Wednesday, my all days, and me and my wife were getting in the van to go pick up these youth kids. And it was like God just boom, and I just started laughing. And my wife's looking at me like, you just got suspended. Why the heck are you laughing? And I'm like, I asked for this.
Yeah.
And she goes, what do you mean? And I told her what I was praying about that morning, and she goes, yeah, you're so hard-headed that God had to give you a good answer now, didn't he? And I was like, I answered the question for sure.
That. So I know this probably isn't how you normally do things, but I'm going to ask you, like, do you feel like as you progress in your leadership, does it get easier?
I think it gets easier to say yes. Like, do I think it is easier, some of the things that God asks you to do? No.
Yeah.
I think that when God knows that you're going to say yes, he's going to challenge your yes.
It's like, I said yes to this, I got it. And you're like, come on.
Yeah, exactly. And but at the same time, dude, it's you get in that position where you're excited about that big yes that you have to do. And you're like, dude, I get to say yes. You chose me to do this. Are you sure?
Dude, I got an analogy. So like I mentioned earlier, like I love hunting. Like that's obviously, it's one of my passions. And this last year, man, I'd say for 2 years, and I put in for an elk tag in Colorado, and I drew it. And I actually drew black bear and an elk tag. And so we're excited. And so me, Landon Jones, Ethan Rusk, and Jacob Jackson, they're all great friends of mine. They're goofballs, man, but I love them, And so we go to Colorado and saying yes to God, talking about that. We had sat down with the map, and it's really easy to look at a map, and say, okay, we're going to go from here to here. We're going to climb to this, and we're going to get up here, and this is where we're going to hunt. And, you look at it, and okay, this is the goal. That's what we're going to do. And then we got there, and we're at the bottom, and we're looking up, and we're like, ooh, we already committed to this. And it's like, trying to get fired up. We got 60-pound packs. We're staying up there for 2, 3, 4 days. And man, we take off up the mountain. And for about 3/4 of the way, I remember thinking we were going to die. And I was like, we said yes to this. This is awful. What were we thinking? And then we got to the top, dude. And it was like, oh man, I'm so glad we said yes to this. Like, this is the best. And we have a picture of all of us like over this overlook, and you can see forever. And man, I've always had that mental picture stuck in my head of saying yes to God. It's like, there'll be a lot of times where you're like, I can't believe I said yes to this. And then you get to a point and you're like, man, thank God that I did this.
Yes, I believe, dude, that's good. I like that a lot. So this one, I really struggled with how to present this question with you, because, I want to make this very clear. Just because you're younger and you're put in the leadership position,
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
God
Sure.
called you for the position that you're in for a reason. And so this question I have for you is as a younger leader, what are some issues or things that you've ran into leading other younger adults?
Uh, that's a great question, man. I'm glad that you put it in because I'm 33 and I've been doing this. I've been doing ministry in some capacity for closing in on a decade now. And man, there's a lot. There's a lot of, and I'm going to be careful how I say this because I don't want it to sound like I'm, I don't want to sound like, oh, I'm bitter, or oh, these people are this. I'm not generalizing, but we spent a lot of time. We grew really rapidly, my wife and I, and my wife has been grounded in her faith for a long time. And in all honesty, she's carried me in faith through so much stuff, praying over me and being there in that capacity when I wasn't the man I was supposed to be. So when I came back to Christ and gave my life back to him and we committed to this, it was like accelerated, and we saw that. We moved fast in ministry, and I have this passion and desire to get to know Christ in a deeper way and to really dig in, and we did. And so we moved along really fast, and it didn't take long before we were doing a lot with the youth, and we were leading, and then we were being asked to do this, and oh, well, you play an instrument, so let's get you on the team. And then everything kind of came at us really fast. And so some of the difficulties were we got to a place where when we showed up at a church, we were really broken and really, me particularly, we were really struggling. And some people have never let that image of us go. They've never seen us grow and never allowed themselves to see what God is truly doing. And I mean, I go back to scripture where even Jesus went back home and tried to do stuff, and it was like, oh, you're just the carpenter's kid. It was very much like a kind of like, oh, we're sure you're great. Good job, slugger. And that's not a knock on anybody. That's just, I think that's just how it's been. And that's okay. That's okay. Because a lot of people have seen what we've grown into and what God has done through us. And it's not because we did it. I mean, we had the heart to say yes, but God did all this stuff. And so the challenges have kind of been, we've been overlooked. We've been hurt. We've been frustrated. There've been a lot of challenges, especially, and then you get to the young people part when you're trying to deal with young people. Man, at 33 years old, I feel like I've done this for a long time, but then I also look back and feel like we just started. So it's this weird thing for me where I don't have a lot of trouble leading young people. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like. I feel like I connect well. I feel like we get along. I feel like people that come into these ministries, whether it's CTO, being young men, or whether it's the young adults thing that we do, I feel like most of them want something and they're seeking it out. And again, when you say yes to God, well, then you're saying yes to these people too, and being present in their lives and helping walk through stuff with them. And so I think for me, like, that hasn't been so much of a struggle. But you do have kind of, when they find out, you're close to their age range, there's kind of this struggle of like, I think that they kind of look at you a certain way sometimes, just like the older generation looks at you a certain way. Well, you're young. I am, but I know what God's doing through us, and I know how God has moved. So I think, like, being perceived from either side, the older generation or the younger generation, you're kind of perceived a certain way. Here you're perceived as, you're too young to do this, and here you're perceived as you're either too old to hang out with us or you're close to our age, so you should be doing the things we do. Yeah. And so I think that's really been, I don't know if that answers that. I know that's kind of roundabout, but that's kind of the way that I view that. Is I don't think our struggles really have been, we haven't experienced a lot of struggles from young people or in that. I think more than anything, it's I think because of our age, sometimes the church is more apt to overlook people because they don't feel like you have the wisdom. They don't feel like you have the experience. And in some places, they're right.
Yeah.
And I will say, I don't have the experience. I'll say in a lot of areas, there are a lot of areas that I got to grow. And I will say that there's a lot of places that I need wisdom. And I'm super blessed to have some amazing mentors in my life, some Christian men that speak truth, even when truth isn't easy to hear.
Yeah.
And I probably wear them out because I'm with as much as we do, there are moments where they have to make a phone call and be like, "Hey, stop! You gotta take a second for yourself. You gotta breathe," and goes back to balance. And it's one of those things that I think that the biggest struggle I face is I struggle when I feel like I'm overlooked. I struggle when I feel like people don't see me as enough. And I'm learning more and more that I don't have to be enough. Like what I'm doing, if it's for me, then it's wrong. If what I'm doing is because I'm trying to prove something, then I'm not doing it for God. I'm not doing it to glorify God. So I am wrong. And I don't struggle with that nearly as much, but I think that's been the biggest struggle as a younger person in ministry.
Yeah.
It can be brutal, man.
I can definitely attest to that for sure. Because and it also goes back, dude, to how we're raised, man. Like you want people to look at you and be like, "Ah, that guy's doing amazing things." But also, I've been in a state where I've had people telling me, "Oh, you're doing great, and you're looking at yourself, and you're like, "You ain't doing jack,"
Yeah.
And but I definitely agree with what you're saying because one of the things I talk to my pastor about a lot is there's a age gap in the church like none other.
100%.
We're sitting at, and it's very broad, but what I've narrowed it down to is about a 10-year gap in between 35 and 25. Finding people that are actually doing ministry in that age group,
It's tough.
I have ran into a handful.
Yeah.
And I've that's one of the things I've been asking myself is, man, how do you speak to yourself? Because everybody that's your same age, how do you talk to yourself? And because now, me being this age and seeing people that are my age going out partying and stuff, dude, that's not appealing to me at all. Like, I remember when it was, but it's not at all. And I don't even want to go to there.
I
You know
hear
what
you.
I mean? And but at the same time, you're like, man, God, you want me to reach them. How do you want me to do it?
Man, that is an interesting thing because we run into that. Like, how are we going to reach the unchurched at that age group that we're targeting when I'm asleep at 8:30? You know what I mean? Like, so we took our young adults group. It was great, man. We had an awesome group of there were 19 of us. We went to Chicken and Pickle in Oklahoma City and played pickleball. If you've never done it, it's a blast.
I've never done that.
Man, it was one of those things that, like, we left the church at 6. We get there, it's from 7 to 9. I'm like, 9, we get done, 9:30, we're home by 10:30. It's gonna be a little bit late, but we got home at 1:00 in the morning. And I was like, because they weren't done. Like, and that's the thing about saying yes. Sometimes it gets me in a bind because it's like, we got done playing pickleball and they're like, well, let's go play cornhole. And I'm not competitive. I just hate losing. So of course we're going to go play. And we're playing pickleball and we're talking to these people about what God's doing in their life and the questions they have about God. And we're sharing our stories and where we've been. And then we're like, all right, well, we're done with pickleball. Let's go play this game. And then next thing you know, it's all of us just sitting around a table for an hour, and just talking and sharing and talking about what God's been doing and what we want God to do and what we see for not just our community and our state, but like what we think the state of the world should look like. And how do we do that? How do we reach that? And it's one of those things that I have to be okay with getting uncomfortable and reaching those people.
Yeah.
Now I set hard boundaries on that. Like, I mean, when I was young, I ran sound in Midland, Texas, and on top of a full-time job. I had a buddy that had a big sound company. And everything we did was in bars, you know, and so that was like what I spent a lot of my time in. And at the time, you know, I was an employee of this company, and so nobody knew anything about me. They all assumed that I was 21. I was 18, 19, and 20. And then when I turned 21, everybody's like, well, you don't go out. And I'm like, yeah, because, man, I'm tired of that life,
I
you
did
know?
that.
And so looking at it now, it's like, there are certain things that I, unless God just truly tells me to go in places and seek people out, I'm not going to go in places. But, man, becoming uncomfortable and being willing to stay up, and sometimes that's kind of tough, man. Talking about challenges for young people, man, it can be tough at 1 o'clock in the morning to stay focused and stay engaged. But
you said it, and I think you don't even realize that you said it. But one of the things that I truly feel that people are missing in the church is that alone, just that connection, man. You know, men's group, women's group, you know, all of it. I remember when I was younger, it was a very intentional thing for guys to meet every week to either play football, basketball, or just cook together every week. And I'm not saying that that's what we have to go back to, but it's coming to a point where we don't do it at all.
Well, and we're so engaged on social media and all these other things that I think that we've used it as a substitute for the interactions that we had, even when we were, because the best friends that I had in my life growing up were the kids that every Saturday we're outside, you know, and roughhousing and, you know, I mean, whatever, going and playing and riding our bikes and all these different things. And there was that relationship that was deep because we're right here, like we're in each other's space. So not only do I know the things that you have to say on social media, but I know how you interact. I know, you know, I know what kind of food you like. I know your family. Like we're in each other's houses. And looking at it, like now we've become so not against relationship, but we've substituted relationship for this false identity that we all create. We can say what we want to. Everybody creates a false identity for themselves on social media because nobody is, you know, getting on social media and being like, oh my gosh, I had Mexican food and I'm having the worst day ever. You know, it's like, we're not posting the real stuff. We're posting, you know, we're posting lyrics to our favorite worship song, and we're posting, oh man, here's our Easter pictures of our family and all, and that's beautiful, but we're not raw with each other anymore. And so we're developing almost as a society this fear of being so real with each other, because then you might perceive me different. When I can keep you at arm's length and you can see me every so often, but the perception that you have of me is what you pick and choose off social media. So you give those characteristics to me when we see each other in public, and it's like, oh, well, that's who he is. No, that's who I was because I was around people. And man, I think that relationship is so important to ministry. And this is another great thing. Tim Tate was my head pastor for a lot of years, and he had a lot of great one-liners that always stuck with me. And he had a quote from another one of his mentors that said, ministry moves at the speed of relationship. And man, that has stuck with me in my ministries. Can I minister to people on the street that don't know me? Sure, absolutely. I think there are people that will be receptive to that. Can I minister to them a lot better if we're friends and they trust what I have to say because they know that I have their best intentions in mind? Absolutely.
100%. So, hey, dude, like, it makes me sad sometimes, you know, like you said, dude, you create those relationships with guys, you know, when we're kids and we're doing dumb stuff together, you know, running down alleyways and stuff. And, you know, and then you grow out of relationships with them and you're like, and I know me and my wife found ourselves in this place often. And it's weird because I'm not saying that people aren't our friends, but it's like, okay, God, you put us in these people's lives for this part. And then now that we start getting good together, then they move on to something else. Man. And, you know, we're not around each other anymore.
Scaffolding and pillars, man, is the best. Like, we've had friends in our life that helped build us up, that we helped build them up. And man, they were super important to us. But God had them there for a season. And I always look at it that they were scaffolding. They helped build something in us. And we helped build something in them. That scaffolding is temporary, right? We're going to take that down and we're going to see what's been built because of that. So eventually the scaffolding comes down, but then there are pillars in your life. And man, the people in my, and man, I could sit here all day, but if I start naming them, I don't want to offend somebody but miss them. But I have all these people in my life that are pillars that they're not going anywhere. They're going to be there until one of us meets Jesus, and then they're going to still remember who the other. They're
going to wait on you to
exactly.
get there.
There are pillars and there's scaffolding, and man, I've learned that the hardest thing for me is being okay allowing the scaffolding to come down.
That is hard, man.
Man, we've had friends that and to this day, and I love them. Like we're not bad terms or anything else, but God called them to a different season or a different state or whatever, a different thing. And that contact begins to kind of spread out. But, and that's okay, because they need that. They need to go and have the pillars in their life, and they need to go and there will be other scaffolding. There will be more pillars, but man, there are some people that you just have to see those relationships in a certain light, and that's helped me. So,
well, and I'm glad that you brought up Landon Jones, because the dude is definitely been being a pillar in my life for sure.
Happy 6-year anniversary to y'all guys.
Yeah,
today too,
also, the Joneses.
The Joneses.
But dude, and I said that to him and Lindsay, separately, like off camera. Like, y'all guys have no idea. How much y'all guys actually truly mean to me and my family. And I think that's what we don't see, is how much we truly mean to people, because we're so focused on where did everybody go. And
that's a word, dude.
Dude, I just like, and I find I'm guilty of it 100%. I can promise you that, because that's one of the things I struggle with, is where is everybody?
Yeah.
But then when you step back, you have people that are like, bro, I love everything that you're doing right now. Man, God's moving so many big ways in your life. And you're like, oh, I didn't even know that you were paying attention.
Man, that's been something, like, especially on the worship side of my life and what I do in ministry, is we're super blessed in our church, man. I love our church. And I think, man, there are so many great churches in this community. Like, I love what we have here. I love what our churches stand for. But our church right now, like, we're running like 500 people on a Sunday. And it's growing so rapidly. And I think a lot of churches are right now. There's something happening in the kingdom. And so I'll get off stage and we'll be done. And people that I've never met in my life. And I'm like, obviously we go to church together, but I'm like, man, I haven't got to meet. And then I feel bad. That's a whole nother story. but they'll come up and be like, hey man, there's this song that I've been listening to that I think you'd be great at here, and they're sharing these songs with me and stuff. And it's like, man, it can be a lot sometimes, like all the relational things. And anyways, we'll get to that here in a little bit, I'm sure. But it can be, that's one of those things that being intentional with our time, being intentional with people is important to me.
Oh yeah, for sure. And people notice that. It's one thing that I've definitely sought at in my personal life, even with my wife and my kids, is to be intentional, right? Because we spend so much of our time, and especially, I hate hitting on guys all the time, but I'm a guy, so that's one of the things I got to do. But men, we are intentional on going to work.
Yeah.
We're intentional on making money. We got to put the food on the table. But then when we get home, we're not intentional with our family anymore.
Yeah.
That intentionality is done.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I've been working on in my life, and it goes back into creating that relationship with your kids, like you said, man. One of the things that I've done with my kids is we made must lists together, right?
Yeah.
Things that we must do every day. And it has become, it's challenging at times, man, because you get busy, but it's like I said to you earlier, man, people just get busy being busy.
Yeah.
And for what?
Yeah. I said in a team meeting a while back that I feel like if we're not careful, we get so busy with ministry that we forget to do ministry.
Yep.
And man, we can get so bogged down in the administrative stuff. And I mean, the fact is that it's there, I mean, it has to be, if we're going to have a spirit of excellence about what we do, we have to carry that over into every aspect of it. And so we all want to be, squared away and be good at what we do. And that involves being good at all the stuff that people don't see. But I think like that's what's getting it too is all these people are watching what we do that we never know about, and all these people, we have to have a spirit of excellence in that stuff. But we get so busy sometimes that like we forget that these people are watching, because as leaders, God put us in a place where people need something, especially people that are coming to churches, people that are coming into CTO, whatever it is, like whatever you're doing, people that are coming into your life are all hungry for something. And if we aren't intentional with our time and we just allow them to be present and not be intentional with them, then we're probably missing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's something also, I keep talking about my goals for the year. The first quarter is ending and I'm focused on goals, and that's kind of my thing is I want to be intentional. I want people to know, if I haven't met you and we're in the same circles or whatever, like I want to meet you. I want to know you. I want to know about your life. I want to be intentional because I want to be able to plug in. And granted, it goes back to good things and God things. I can't be that way with everybody.
Yeah.
But I want people to know, that my heart is for people. Because I know that's what we're called to. That's what Jesus' heart was for people. It was about coming and doing his Father's business. And so that should be our heart. But I think we got way off from your question, and I apologize. I tend to rabbit trail, but it was a great discussion.
That was a very good discussion. And it's funny because, in a sense, it didn't really get far away from the question because it answered the question. But one of the things that I really feel like God's doing in his kingdom is that he's building it. He's building his army, man. And dude, when I say I haven't been in touch with so many amazing leaders, just hungry for God. I haven't seen this many moves of leaders in a long time, man. And it's amazing. And I'm just so happy and graced to be a part of it,
And I want to tell you too, like the things you're doing here, man, this is so important. I think we do have, I mentioned this a second ago, we have so many amazing things happening in not just this community, but if we just focus on Seminole, man, there's amazing stuff happening here. We have some powerful men and women of God in this community. And we have so many churches that are all doing these great, great things for the Lord. And it's super encouraging, but man, it goes back to the body. Like my heart is, I want to see all those churches interact.
Yep.
I'm not trying to take from yours, and I know y'all aren't trying to take, and it's not about that. Like I think we got to get a different perspective on the body of Christ. And my thing is I think there are certain people, like with CTO, for instance, we have kids that come in that don't have a home church. Maybe their families, haven't ever sought one out. Maybe they're not even Christian, whatever that looks like. But when you speak with them, I think that God places all, we have all these different pastors and I believe they're all anointed, but they all have different styles. And my style and some stuff may be different than yours. And for these kids, like their family style, like what they want or what they feel comfortable with may be different in different places. So plugging them in some place that it fits is important to me.
Yeah.
But in order for that to happen, and it works great. Like we have great relationship here with y'all's home church, with Colton from even Harvey Road Baptist and several of these other churches like Lord's Community. Like we have relationship with all these people, and that's wonderful. But man, my heart is to see all these churches be able to cross-pollinate, I guess is a way to look at it. Like, let's all do stuff together. Let's plan an event, and let's not make it about whose church name is there. Let's make it about, man, the body of Christ is showing up, and we're going to come and talk to the community and outreach and love on people. And if they come up and say, hey, what church are you all? I'll be like, we're all of them. Which one do you want to go to? Like, we have these different programs. This is what we do. This is, and let them decide where they fit. And man, that's my heart. But
right. And I agree. I think people get stuck in the denominational game.
Yes.
And Sheldon McCoy, I'm calling you out right now, dude. Me and him were at FCA together with me and my wife, Sheldon, and Jolie and Tyler Miller. all three of us are from different churches. And, I'm sitting there preaching to these kids, and, we're all pressing in, praying together and all this stuff. And a lady asked Sheldon, she goes, "Oh man, what church do y'all go to?" And he goes, "Well, I'm non-denomination. He's Pentecostal Church of God. They're Baptist." He goes, "So which?" He said,
one,
he's like, "We're a body of believers. That's what we're here
that's what
doing."
matters.
And
dude, we've got to be able to look at it that way, because we can get bogged down and I'll be honest, and this might be a controversial take, you might cut out later, but I think that that's what the enemy wants is man, okay, well, I can't get him to not believe in God, but I can get him to argue about the specifics.
Yeah.
And my thing, like, we have conversation with some of these, people in different ministries and young adults, not arguments. We have different discussions where some of the young adults, I love that, because something about this generation behind us, man, is they're going to tell you what they think.
Yep.
And they're going to ask questions because they want and they deserve the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have discussion about stuff. And one thing that I've challenged them is, they'll be like, "Well, what about this? And this separates these two denominations. So what's the answer?" And I'm like, will it keep either one of them out of heaven? And I think when we look at it, like, are they seeking a true and honest relationship with God? And if they are, and they're passionate about it, does that thing matter so much? And some things might. Listen, I'm not a theologian, I don't claim to be, but I will say that most of the conversations that I've had with any denomination, if we can sit down and we can agree that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins and he rose again, and that he is the living God, he's the Son of the living God. If we could agree on that, and that he's the only way that we experience salvation,
yep,
then what else really matters? Some people are going to come after me, and I know it.
Yeah.
Be easy.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, does it matter if you listen to Elevation and I want to sing hymns? No.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if we run our sound at 90 decibels in our auditorium and you guys have a piano player, no, that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And I think we get so hung up on the particulars that we go back to, oh, well, that church is wrong. No, that church is different. Mm-hmm. They're different than you. But when we look at the disciples, man, the disciples were a lot different too.
They were.
And they did a lot of great things, despite all the ways that they viewed things. So before I get off on a rabbit trail, that's my take is if you have a difference with somebody else that's a believer, ask yourself, will it keep you out of heaven? Do we believe the same things as far as Jesus?
Well, and that's one of the things, like, man, just because you're non-denomination and I'm Pentecostal Church of God does not mean that God has not made you a fantastic leader, and God has not made me a fantastic
leader. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, we can show up at each other's church services and still experience the presence of God. Mm-hmm. And it should be that way. I mean, whether it's Baptist, Pentecostal, non-denominational, interdenominational, whatever you want to look at, like, man, God is God in every single one of those buildings. Mm-hmm. Stop putting a label on him. I don't think God's going to come down and be like, well, listen, all you Pentecostals almost had it. Like, that's not who he is. You know what I mean? Well, he may say that about non-denominational too, but that's just my take on it, man.
Yeah, I hear you, dude. So I got one more question for you.
Okay.
And this is a big one to me, because it helps me find out, like, what would you say to somebody who is starting a ministry and just seeking some guidance?
Man, we kind of had a discussion earlier about something I tell the boys in CTO and tell Catalyst, and every chance that I get to minister, I feel like it's probably one of my like, I always tell everybody that it's eventually I got to get this tattooed on me. I've got some different tattoos, but it's read, worship, and pray. Man, if you want to go into ministry, if you're starting a ministry and you're seeking guidance, the first thing I'm going to tell you is it is incredibly difficult. And you will see amazing, amazing things when you say yes to God. You will be taken to places that you will never get to go on your own. I mean, man, I've got a laundry list of amazing things. I've got this past year, man, I'm debating on whether I get into it, but I'm going to, because I think that it needs to be said. Like there's a friend of ours. He's the national director of our ministry. He's a bear guide, and man, I wanted to shoot a black bear since I was a kid. And he called me, and these are very, very expensive hunts. And he called me. He said it's taken care of. I've got you. He said you get up here and you're gonna shoot a black bear. And after that, I was telling a buddy. He said I got airline miles. I'm gonna fly you out there. And got up there, shot a 521-pound trophy black bear. That's amazing. And I would never get to do that on my own. And then we show up at the taxidermist. The taxidermist's like, man, all those guys from CTO, I know you. And the taxidermy bill was taken care of. And man, I didn't go seek that out. I didn't go and like, well, listen, I'm a minister. No, man, God just moved and God had already made a way. So you're going to experience amazing things, but I will tell you, if you want to start a ministry, you're going to experience some extremely difficult things. Mm-hmm. You're going to experience, there are things that I think as we grow and as we mature in our life, there are things that from our past that we've said or done or we felt or maybe did or whatever, that I think we all have things that we lock away and forget about or don't think or choose to not think about. Man, the enemy's going to throw everything at you that he has, and he's going to try to remind you of those things and tell you how unqualified you are and tell you how you can't do it. You're going to hear everything negative about yourself, and maybe from people close to you. Yep. I mean, I hate to say that, but the truth is the truth. If you're going to start ministry, I don't want people to go into it blind that God is good, but man, people are tough. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked me the other day what the best part of ministry was. I said, man, the people. And I said, what's the worst part? I said, man, the people, and I love people, but it's extremely tough to walk into this. And it's not to be done lightly. Yeah. Ministry isn't something that's like, oh, it'd be cool to go and start this, man. If you're going to start it, you need to know what it entails. And I touched on this in the very beginning, but you need a team. Mm-hmm. And not just for the ministry, you need a team for you. You need a team of people that believe in who you are and what God is doing in you. Because if you don't have that, you find those things like, some people call it burnout, whatever. You find those things a lot faster. Whereas when you have a team of people that are watching out for you, a team of mentors and elders and people that can speak into your life, and with that, you have to be submitted to them. You have to be willing to hear some stuff about yourself that you might not want to hear. Yeah. Man, as ministers, there's such a responsibility because we've seen through history that there's the ability as a minister, especially when you have a group of people that do listen to you and do follow you. Man, if you don't stay grounded biblically, you can lead those people in a place and then it can become a pride thing. It can become you're no longer glorifying God, but you're glorifying yourself. Yep. You're glorifying something. And man, that's a big deal. And it's a scary deal. And so I think those are the things that if you're starting a ministry, have a team for the ministry, have a team for yourself. Be extremely grounded and be prepared because you're going to go to war. And I don't want that to sound super ominous and scary, but it's the facts that the enemy is okay. The enemy's okay if you go sit in church every Sunday. That doesn't bother me. But when you allow it to take root in your life and you begin to make changes for the kingdom, that's when things start to happen. That's when you start to experience things. And this isn't about spiritual warfare. That's not for this podcast, but this is one of those things that I think people need to be prepared that it will be the toughest thing you ever do in your entire life. But man, it's just like the mountain, like we talked about. There will be days where you're like, I'm going to die on this mountain. Like they're going to find my body up here and I'm going to be unaccomplished and unfulfilled and I'm not going to get done what I set out to do. But man, when you press into God and you go past what you think you're capable of and you allow God to do it through you and you don't try to force it, you let God move in those places, man, you get to the top at some point and you're like, I'm glad I got here, And then there's another mountain. Like that's the beautiful thing about ministry is there's always something else, right? Like, man, we had a great service. We had people saved. We had people baptized, whatever. It's like, now it's time for the next one.
Let's do it again. And see, that's one of my, I love the way you said that because I think people get in that mindset that they're like, oh, I know I can make it up this mountain because of the good thing. What I've learned in my ministry is once I'm climbing that mountain, when I get to the top, I'm not even like, oh, look what I did. Now it's like, man, God, you are
Yes,
awesome,
100%.
bro. Like, you're like, dude, I can't believe you did that in my
Yeah.
life. Like, and it's crazy.
It goes back. We talked about emotion.
Yeah,
Like
dude.
that's where I get emotional,
Yeah.
man. And I'm not gonna sit here and tell you stories on that, but I could. But I will tell you, like when we started CTO, man, it was tough. You don't talk about a leap of faith. We left a successful business to walk into something that was totally unknown. And me and my wife ventured into this. We did build a team. We had all this stuff, and it was awesome. But I feel like it's okay to be really transparent on this. So if not, cut it out. But man, I wanted to quit like before we really got going. Before we did our first outing, I was like, God, maybe I missed it. Like this is horribly difficult. And the people, there was pushback and there was all these different things. That's not gonna work. You can't do this. Well, what about this? And liability and it's like, man, we've put every safeguard in place that we can think of, and we've got all these things. And then we showed up to the first outing, and the very first outing, this kid showed up, and I sat down. We did the question of the day. I sat down, I start doing the devotion, talking about salvation. And this kid goes, I need that. Cuts me off, middle of it. I need that. It's like, yeah, buddy, we all need that. No, I need it right now. And I was like, oh, all right, man, let's go. Like, get up. We're going to pray. And this kid said a prayer and asked God into his life. And he said, what now? And I said, well, now, we're going to talk about baptism. And he goes, well, let's go. And I was like, well, hold up, dude. That's a process. Let's talk about it, And he goes, listen, he said, I don't want to leave this weekend without being baptized. And dude, we went to Jeff Goodnight's pool in Seminole, Oklahoma, and all his family showed up. And dude, we got in the pool together and we baptized this kid, and he came out. And I remember raising him up out of the water, and I was praying. I was like, God, you're so faithful. And I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't quit. I'm glad I didn't buy into that and stop,
And that's one of the things that is one of the hardest things in ministry is that the devil uses your own mind on you.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I'm a firm believer in spiritual warfare, man. If you don't think spiritual warfare is real, you better wake up, because it's there.
Man,
and
it is. 100%.
Here is the biggest battleground.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I told my wife all the time. I said, if I can do anything for my kids, if I can make them better here than I've been, I've
for
done
sure,
something, man.
I think we give the enemy a lot of credit in places sometimes. Like growing up, I had a grandma that everything that happened is like, oh, the devil's after me. It's like, no, you were just irresponsible. I think there are times where it's like we convince ourselves. And growing up, I never felt good enough. I always felt like I was struggling and striving to be something, to prove something. And so I think now, like, I have to remind myself, like, spiritual warfare is very real. And I agree 100%. It's a thing, and I face it. We've been in it. But sometimes it's just my own insecurities, my own doubts, man. And I've got to learn. And that's another thing, going back to your question. If you're going to start a ministry, you're going to battle your own insecurities. And all this other stuff is scary, but man, I think what we create of ourselves and our own mind can be one of the scariest things we have to face.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Well, man, dude, it was amazing to have you on my show. And I was so happy that you said yes.
Man, I appreciate you having me. It's great.
But we're going to wrap it up.
Cool.
Thank y'all guys for watching. Come back next week for another amazing leader. We're actually going on the road this next episode, so tune in.